This week's vlog going to be a little bit different this week. I'm not fishing this week. I'm hoping to get out maybe next week. I haven't been out a whole bunch. We've been doing some traveling, but anyways, this week's vlog is all about a question that I get asked quite a bit, usually by younger guys that are trying to get into the fishing industry. And I just want to give them a run through because most of the time they ask me how I got into it and some tips and tricks and some ideas as to what you could do to get into the fishing business at this point. So I'm actually going to break this down into two parts. So the first part is going to be vlog number one, is going to be how I got into the business, how it started for me, and maybe some influences that I had, and where I'm kind of sitting right now. Part two will be, I did a thing at Ed's at Paddle Tails years ago about pro staffing, and it was pretty well received. I think guys got a pretty good chuckle out of it, but it's kind of a do's and don'ts. And we've all seen these online, but I've got a little bit of a different take on it, I think. And so that'll be part two. So part one, how did I get into the fishing business? Well, we have to go way back. I'm talking, well, for some of you young guys, you might not have been around then, but in 2003, there was a fishing forum in my area called fishhawk.net, which coincidentally I'm now part owner of. But yes, there was a thing called fishing forums previous to Facebook and Instagram and all the social media that we have now. And so these forums were an area where people could meet and converse, tell stories, help other anglers out online. At times it was a bit of a toxic situation on the forums, just like you see it on Facebook, people, the old keyboard warrior type thing. But for the most part, it was great for everybody, and I met some of the best friends in my life ever through Fishhawk. So way back when I joined in 2003, and I just started posting reports and taking pictures and telling stories and how I caught the fish. And if people would ask a question, I would answer the question as honestly as I could with the experience that I had back then. Even today, we don't all know everything, but I would help people out and just really enjoy doing it. So once you've established that, and it took years, like 5, 6, 7, 8 years, that you kind of get, I don't know if you want to call it respected opinion or what, you just as a person that people might want to ask a question to, and they might get a positive reply back, and helping people out. And so that's really where it started for me, was in 2003 on Fishhawk. So the problem with fishing forums, and what I changed in my own way, was that my reports that I was writing, they'd end up going down the page and they'd disappear. Well, now on Facebook it disappears in an hour. So, but back then it would come down the page. So I decided to create my own website that would host my own reports, which I did that in 2009. And then I was just posting my own reports there. So then people started reading my reports online. The game changer for me was in 2010, January 8th, 2010. And I still remember it today. Big Jim McLaughlin emailed me and asked me if I wanted to do a presentation with him at the old LeBaron store in Ottawa. So I immediately, and I had no aspirations to do this. I'd never even thought about doing this. It wasn't even on my radar to do this. I'd seen Jimmy do it a bunch, and and he was great at it. And I thought, well, I don't know if that's for me. And he talked me into it. So went down to LeBaron's with him that night. Gave a seminar. I don't even know what it was. Probably ice fishing in Eastern Ontario or something along those lines. Just really generic stuff, just to kind of get my feet wet. And I enjoyed it. It was probably terrible and brutal, and hopefully I've gotten better at it over the years. I don't know. I don't really watch myself. So anyways, that was the start of it. So that evening was actually, it was sponsored by HT. So Jimmy put me in contact with Tom Grunwald at HT. Next thing you know, I'm suddenly working with HT promoting their product. And that's kind of where it started for me. So now I've got my website, and now I've got my first quote unquote, I don't call them sponsors, because unless you're paying me a whole bunch of money, you're not a sponsor. We have a working relationship, and for promotional goods. So from that point on, I approached companies that the product I was already using. So at the same time, I had had a Vexilar for 7 years at that point, 6 or 7 years at that point. I reached out to Vexilar on my own and kind of gave them what I'm doing and showed them my website and showed them some reports. And next thing you know, I'm on with Vexilar. So back then, I wouldn't say it was easier, but I think there seemed to be a lot less guys doing it and having the avenue to do it. So that was a big thing, that I actually had a platform where I could share reports and talk about product, and it was a positive thing for them and for me to get teamed up with these companies. So that would have been in February or March when I hooked up with Vexilar. The biggest one was Jim had got me a meeting with down in Shimano at Peterborough. So basically he just said to me, dude, you have a meeting? That's all I can say. It's up to you. You do the rest. It's up to you. You can make it happen or you cannot make it happen. It's totally up to you. So I went down to Shimano, which would be, I think this would be my 10th year with Shimano this year, and sat down with them, kind of told them who I was, and shockingly at that point, they already knew who I was. So, if you don't think people are reading stuff online, you're wrong, because they read everything. All these companies, the marketing directors are reading everything, especially now more so with social media. But back then, there's only so many places they could read, and turns out they already kind of read some of my stuff and knew what I was about ahead of time. So I got on with Shimano that year, and it's been, amazing since then. Other companies that I ended up hooking up with over the years, and you talk about do's and don'ts, I'll talk about that later, but I've only left 2 companies, and one was kind of, my hand was forced, and that was fine, and it worked out amazing. And the other one, my deal really changed. So when the deal really changed, I ended up switching, and that's how I ended up going with Clam and the Ice Team, which was a really good deal for me and for them, I hope. And so I tried to be loyal, as and I hung on maybe longer than I should have in some situations, but that I was just being loyal to a fault. But from then on, I've just worked with these companies throughout those years. So then the Lund Pirate Cove deal kind of just plopped in my lap, and mainly because I think Mo and Brett over at Pirate Cove kind of knew who I was. They knew me from the area, and they were looking for somebody to do some work for them, and it's been a great fit. I'm not saying that deal's out there for everybody, because I know I'm extremely blessed and lucky to have that deal and appreciative of it. But these deals do exist. Like, you can make this happen. So that's kind of how it started for me. One thing I don't do throughout the years, and I've been very reluctant to do it, is I don't really pursue anything that I don't already use their product. So I don't jump up and down trying to find new deals for me. I'm kind of very comfortable with what I'm doing right now. But when you're first starting, just make sure you're not just setting up and trying to get a deal, because the deal for you right out of the gate, you might regret it and you might not like it 6 months from now. And if you don't use the product at all, well, what was the point of doing it at all? But so I've said the word deals a bunch of times, and it's not really a deal. It's more of a relationship, a working relationship with these companies that you represent day in, day out. No matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, you're representing these companies. So I'll get into that a little bit in part 2 of this, but hopefully just gives you a little idea as to how I got into this. What the progression of it turned into a guiding business for me. So I found myself getting to a point where I was taking people fishing, we were using the product, everything was great, but gas costs money. And I kind of thought at one point, maybe if I took a couple people fishing a month, and I'd be able to cover my gas, and I could go fishing the rest of the time, and it would kind of pay for the gas, and my hobby would pay for itself. That was a great idea until I opened the guide business, and then suddenly I didn't really fish so much anymore, because it really took off, which I'm really grateful for. It's been an amazing deal, the guiding business, and it's just going to grow from here. now that we have Chevy on board, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. But so that's kind of how I got into it and where I am now. And then, but in the next video, I'm going to kind of give you some tips and tricks that might help you as you work your way into the fishing business.